Welcome, everybody, to another exciting episode of our podcast vlog episode here. We've got Chance Eaton with us from Big Sky Way. Chance, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Joel. Appreciate that.
This is fantastic. Chance, you do some really cool things in the business world, but before we get into that, let's get to know you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you got a couple of great kids. You came here from Missoula, but you've got a great farming background history, and so I want to hear about that.
Yeah, first and foremost, like being a father, they call me Papa. That's the coolest thing. Like, that's quite a treat. So everything kind of revolves around being a parent, first and foremost. But I grew up in Lindsay, Montana, so southwest of Lindsay, a little community called Union Valley. And my family homesteaded there in 1909. And I'm fifth generation Eaton and grew up farming and ranching. Commercial cattle, registered Charlet, wheat, barley, feed crops. And so agriculture and business was kind of how you grow up. That was the context. And had classic business background. And I left the farm in my early 20s, probably for a couple of reasons. One is I'm kind of a curious guy. I like watching the psychology, and I didn't have the acumen for it, but why is it that one of my cousins, when he fenced, when he spliced wire, every single time he made 3 wraps, and he was perfect every time. Like, how can you be that consistent? Or I had an uncle that was just an idea guy. He always had a new, bold, pioneering concept for something. Or my father why is he so good in these developmental relationships? And just watching all that was curious, or why am I so influenced by this leadership style or another? And so I was just interested in like the psychology of work, the psychology of conflict. So small business, family business, lots of conflict. And then I was a bit of a philosopher. So as I'm trucking or driving a tractor, I'd start thinking about, where do we come from? What do we live for? What do we live by? What are we supposed to believe in? And if we're all going to die someday anyway, what sense does this make? So I had all these existential, problems in my mind, the absurd condition, needing meaning in a universe that doesn't provide one. And so what do you do with all that stuff? You leave. You leave and you go explore yourself. And so I left the farm and went back to school and just did a lot of cool, crazy work. I worked in mental health for a couple of years as an HR director and as a counselor. Managed a nonprofit, worked in higher education, so I taught college universities for about 6 years, and some of that was in London. So that was a trip.
Well, you leave small town Montana. Where's your first step? You go where?
Oh, I went back to school for psychology.
Where at?
Missoula, and then from there
we go.
And
See,
there
we're bringing along the Grizz factor here.
Yeah.
That's all.
And traveled to Europe, and then. I worked in state government for about 6 years doing this same kind of work, organizational development. And for school, I always say I'm one of the most curious people in the room. I'm never the smartest, but I've got a lot of questions and I look at things in an interesting fashion. So a lot of school, a couple undergraduate degrees in finance and psychology, and some advanced degrees in existential psychotherapy, psychology, business, and then a terminal degree, doctoral degree. And so I don't know, it's just all kind of a fun trip. And the consulting, I started this in 2009. I had a client asking if I could help a little bit and started getting some international coaching clients, and it kind of picked up. Sometimes people take chances on you. I think that's part of success is you're lucky sometimes. And he had me be his performance manager, and he had employees in the Philippines and India and Slovakia and London and China. And so I became that performance manager for a international procurement mining company. And so you learn a lot about just coaching and what do people need, and once you do some travel with all that, people are pretty similar. There's something raw about human psychology. So all that mixed together is kind of what started it. And so I ran the business for a couple of years, and then with little kids, benefits were really important, and that's where I went back to work for the state. And then 2 years ago, I went back to work on my own. Yeah, best decision I ever made. I had a 6-figure, sweet salary, nice benefits, corner office, one of those jobs you just live in. Big budgets, big project budgets, and then you just walk away. So to zero, right?
Wow.
That's the risk, but the reward is totally worth that.
By the way, when you talk about your education, it makes me feel real small, because all the stuff you have done, I can't imagine. I feel like I put in so many ridiculous hours into mine, and then I hear people like you, and I'm like, I can't ever complain. Like it's just amazing when you talk about the business, the econ, the psych background. I'm just like, holy cow, that's impressive.
It's just a general curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and with everything, there's something beautiful about that, but then there's prices you pay.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have that social life. You miss out on some things, but
Mm-hmm.
everything has good and bad.
Yeah. So you're working for the state. You decide I'm going to go out on my own. How the heck does that happen? What I don't want to say drove you, but what pushed you that way?
Well, part of decision making is making sure you know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are your fundamental values? What's important to you? What drives you? What are those principles that you adhere to? And you have to pay attention to that. And so when you start to work in kind of that corporate finance environment and the siloing, the politicking, the turf wars, that gets so exhausting at a point in time. And how I'm built is I want to change. I want to grow. I want to take something from being great to, something from good to being great. And after a while, if you don't feel like you're getting those opportunities and there's not enough value you provide, you start looking, you look elsewhere. And how I'm built, I'm a moderate entrepreneur, and I don't want to work for another company, So you just you start exploring, how do I pick this back up? What's my client base? What are my relationships? And it really wasn't a tough decision at all when you weigh all the garbage with the opportunity. And when you take those kind of risks, they're calculated. I could sell my house, I could sell my vehicles. Our family's going to be fine. So it really wasn't a tough decision because deep down I knew who I was and what was important to me.
Well, that's interesting, the way you approach that, because Brad and I have these conversations. So much of what holds us back as people, as entrepreneurs, is that fear of losing the house, losing the vehicle. I mean,
right.
The number of sleepless nights I had starting my company and starting my law office was not my first business. I've owned several businesses before, and yet I was still wrought with fear over losing my house.
Right.
What a goofy concept, but it does. It hits us.
Yeah. I think consciously we all want change. We want something better, but it's that subconscious piece of what keeps us back. And you have to explore that. And that's getting back to those values and those beliefs. Because I watch this all the time. People that say, I'm tired of this place. I'm going somewhere else. They interview, they accept the job. And that last week at their job, like, well, this is kind of comfortable. Well, I do kind of know what's going on. And they stay. There's almost a cowardice to it. But you've got to really listen to yourself. And really that subconscious piece. What's important to me.
What allowed you to get over that hurdle then?
Part of, all those limiting beliefs I have to address. What if I lose the house? What if it doesn't work? And so, with the background in psychology, you learn to explore all this stuff and how do you calm your limbic system, which might be unreasonable thoughts. And how do you explore that? So it really isn't activating a fight or flight response anymore. You're doing a pure logic, emotional, fact-based decision. So you're calming all the irrational thinking.
So when my wife is dealing with me and I'm in an irrational state, hopefully not alcohol-induced, but I'm in an irrational state, she needs to know about my limbic system and how to keep me calm.
She needs to calm that alligator brain,
Is that what it is?
That reptilian brain, yeah.
I have a question, if that's okay, because I think it's kind of related. So those listening to the show, I'm Brad. I'm Joel's second guy on the microphones here, and that's okay. So a buddy of mine in Arizona, I'm going to give him a shout out here. He's listened to the show before. His name is Vincent Orlick. He works for the Arizona Sun Devils. Actually, he's in their innovative department, and then he does some really incredible things at that college with the students. And he tweeted out a question that I want to ask you. And I'll take more questions in the future. Tweet me at NextGenBizman. It's in the show notes. Tweet me your questions for our guests, and I'll be happy to ask them. Can you be entrepreneurial minded without being an actual entrepreneur?
Oh, that's good. So, let me repeat that. Can I be entrepreneurially minded without being an entrepreneur? Absolutely. Right? I mean, can you be entrepreneurially minded in state government or federal government? So when we look at, there's this personality component, right? There's a trait component to how we're all fundamentally built. And that's why personality assessments are used. And we know the measuring personality through the psychometrics, test, retest, reliability. If we come back and assess you later in time, you show up to have very similar characteristics. So we know there's something right about them. There's a lot of crap out there as well. But we know entrepreneurial factors that exist, and you could work in a government agency. It's just, is that being used? It's, the old saying is, are you on the right bus and are you on the right seat? So if that agency said, yeah, we're allowing for innovation, creativity, bold thinking, and they're allowed to express that, that's entrepreneurialism. And they don't have to go own a business. But it sure helps when you run your own business as an entrepreneur that you have those entrepreneurial components. It sure helps. Or you have other people on the bus that can help bring that alive. You just have to be mindful of it and allow that to be part of that nice soup.
That's awesome. and I think that's if you've ever, for those of you out there, if you've ever read any of the Traction books or series, the difference between being a visionary and an integrator. Right, and in having the right people in the right seats.
Right.
If you're a visionary, you aren't the detail guy. You're not the guy getting the company from A to B. You're the guy putting this big image together, the vision of where the company's going to go.
Right.
You're the Steve Jobs, right? But when you're the integrator, you're the Wozniak. You're the guy putting the rubber to the road and making it happen.
Yep.
And it's one of the funny things, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, but partnerships, one of the great things I love about partnerships is when you get that visionary and integrator together is to watch how awesome they are.
Right, and that's what all the psychology says now, or the research around positive psychology is know how you're built, know where your strengths are, and know where you're not strong. Classic example, I'm very strategic. I like modeling, I like concepts. And so there might be a project here, and I'm going to do some of the research, think of different ways to go about this, blah, blah, blah. But then I work with my partner who's very good at executing tasks. And they're basically going to call out, work on all these vendors that I've identified that I think fit that criteria. Because that will literally take me 3 months to get done. Because it's not high priority, it's boring work. I'm going to have to get bids and proposals and blah, blah, blah. She'll do it in one day. She comes back one day later saying, I've contacted all these. Here's all the proposals for you, Chance. I mean, that's the whole point of that synergy of knowing where my strengths are, your strengths are, a good bus with people in the right seats. But it takes good leadership to recognize that and appreciate that. But this is where we see a lot of economic value coming today. Like new companies, great companies are strength-based. And that's a paradigm shift. For example, here's a strength concept. Most parents want to put most of their energy and attention into their child's worst grades. So my son struggles with math a little bit. And so my parental instinct is, bring your book home every night, Will. We're going to work on your math and just really be steady on it. Because that way, when you leave my house someday, if you leave my house someday, you're going to be well-rounded, okay? But he loves arts. He loves writing. He's very good he's got a kind of a psychological mindset. And so he needs to do well in math. He needs to manage his weaknesses. Let him get a C. Let him get a B. But when he leaves my house and he knows he's wicked smart in these areas, and we put energy and attention into it, he leaves knowing I'm really good when it comes to writing. I'm very good at leadership, communication. These are the areas that I thrive at. I'm going to be a better parent for that. And he's going to be more productive and profitable. Because even in companies, we know that when we play to strengths, employees are 8% more productive, 9% more profitable, 6 times as likely to be engaged, 3 times as likely to have good living in general.
Can you do me a favor and slow those stats down?
Yeah,
I'd love to hear them like in slow-mo right
they
there.
Just rule.
I was just like sucked in. I was like, yes, more.
So we know that if you play to your strengths every day, 3 times as likely to have good quality living, 6 times as likely to be engaged at work. And engagement means it's correlated with profitability, productivity, customer satisfaction, retention, safety. And then 8% more productive, 9% more profitable. So there's something right about how we're right. And so why don't we utilize that talent? And so now when you look at companies or organizations or families, it looks different. We see all these flavors, and they're not all the same. So it takes skill. This is where you see, I work in the management leadership field a lot, which is this workplace psychology. Instead of being general with everybody, which is that 1950s model of a manager, it's learning how to individualize the conversation, the feedback, et cetera.
What do you mean by being general with everybody? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so general feedback. Good job. Good job at what?
Yeah.
Here's kind of the general expectations, or here's some feedback for you. People are craving to be talked to in a way that fits them. Like, so how I'm fundamentally built, I want support, I'm inclusive, I'm collaborative, right? There's a tenderness. Like I'm not dominant. I'm not controlling. Now I have to flex into that a lot. I've had to do that in all my jobs. I have to sometimes provide discipline, etc. But if I always say, come to me with a cookie first, right? Don't come to me with, hey, where are the results on that? Where are we at with this project? You've kind of pissed me off a little bit. Come to me with a cookie and connect with me for 10 seconds, and then you got me. So as you learn how people are built a little bit different, it changes. It's like you're speaking the same language, and that builds trust. There's a statement of respect there. And so these are cheap, easy things to do, and it's kind of like you're cheating at life, right? I'm a better parent because of it, because I know how my kids want to be woken up differently in the morning. Will wants a nice, gentle good morning, and Claire wants the light on. Get out of bed, let's go.
It's almost, so what you're describing is almost like a business version of love languages.
Exactly. Love language is considered another kind of it might not be trait theory, but it's how do you want, what do you want in a relationship? And what do I want in a relationship? And then you learn to flex with each other. Absolutely. Great example.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm a lot more like your daughter. I'm like, you get up, you go. Yeah, I walk into the office, and my thing is I'm just, okay, what are we doing? Where are we at? Okay, next.
Right.
I'm all business. I want to get things done and keep moving. And I struggle with people like my wife, who's like your son, who says, when you wake up in the morning, it's really nice to just kind of let the day begin. Yeah. Don't force it.
So I've been both of those. And I don't know why, but just you saying that and hearing that in my head, like I've not always been the up early in the morning, go get 'em kind of person. Actually, in my much younger years, I loved sleeping till noon. Like that was just my thing. I don't know why, but since finding something that lit me on fire, now I'm jumping out of bed. It's 6 a.m. or 5 a.m., 4:30 a.m., sometimes 3:30 a.m.
That might be a motivation issue more than a personality issue.
Yeah, agreed. But it's also now hard to turn off. So I don't know if that's a force of habit now.
Yep.
Right, but
so part of your environment. So like finance school, MBA, right? These things force you to think about what does the data say, what are the results. So those kind of experiences will round you out. And I think the big lesson is you can't live in your space. So if my daughter gets very critical, she's skeptical, she's objective. A lot of attorneys are built like that, and she has a little bit of that in her. She brings so much value to our family. And I said, but you can't live there all the time. You have to flex out of it sometimes. The whole lesson in this is how do you be more complete? And so if I tend to be more supportive, sometimes I need to be more dominant. I need to be more skeptical and questioning. I need to be more accurate. I need to be more encouraging, etc. It's learning how to open up those comfort zones, knowing where to flex. But at the end of the day, I'm still built in a certain way, and there's something right about that, and going with that.
That's so cool. Man, that's awesome. I've never heard anybody talk about it like this before. This is really awesome.
I had one guy say, after working with you, Chance, it's like you're simplifying the universe. Because think about family dynamics, any social system work. It's really complex. There's moving pieces. Once you start laying some of the what we know about work psychology as kind of a filter, things start to get simpler, and you start to organize the world. I know how to have better interaction. I know how to go through the strategic process. You're simplifying things, so it's more useful. Because if it's not useful, it's a bad way. It's bad use of time.
Wow.
And I think some of that simplicity comes from my farming background. Like, I just want things. Even though I appreciate the rigor of science and research, it's that application. Something elegant. Mother Nature is very elegant. She's very simple. And you got to go with that momentum. And so I think a lot of that contributes to how I see things, how I practice.
That's fantastic. I love the way you're bringing the relationships with your kids into this and how that directly applies to the workplace.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Right? It's still building relationships, building trust.
They're all social systems.
Yeah.
I mean, faith in a family, what's that look like at a workplace? Well, there's not a religion, but there's still a culture. And it's like a religion. So I just find if you, Naked and Afraid, have you ever watched the show? Like,
No.
So I don't know what channel it's on. They put two people out in the wilderness and they've got to survive for like 3 weeks, and they're naked and they're afraid. And so this is one of the tests. Like, we're watching raw.
By the way, Brad, I am not doing that show.
I was just gonna say, do not.
Off limits.
Nope.
It's public TV. But you're watching raw human psychology. We've only been around for 250,000 years. And so you're just watching the raw dynamics, and then all social systems are pretty similar. So the stuff I'll teach in leadership courses, you should use every single bit of it in a family situation, at church, in your communities, nonprofits, boards. It just doesn't matter. It's just social systems.
Wow. So you've left the state and you start Big Sky Way. Tell us, what is Big Sky Way? What does it do? And what does it do for you? What void is Big Sky Way filling for you?
So I like to start to say it's a business consulting firm, because that's, people can kind of wrap their mind around that, but it specializes in organizational health. And so we're looking at culture, we're looking at leadership, we're looking at employee development. What it does for me, I think it's just a practice of who I am. Like, one thing we find in the research now is people don't want a job anymore. They want a life. And they want work to be an extension of who they are. So it's just a practice of chance. It's letting me be me. And so I think when you grow up in a farm, and I've had a lot of crap jobs like everyone else, you appreciate being in something that fits who you are. And I think there's a lesson for all companies there. How do we get people on the right seat of the bus? So it's a spiritual practice, right? Building relationships, working closely with teams, listening, trying to understand. You try things out. Sometimes they don't work, but we're trying to get better, and we're trying to come at it from a very strategic place. And so it's just satisfying to go into a marketplace that just doesn't know how to do this stuff, and to educate. Because first and foremost, I'm an educator. I love to teach, and so it just plays to all my preferences, my skills, my talents.
So what types of businesses do you work with? Do you just in Montana, or outside of Montana?
So right now, little kids, I'm trying to stay close. I have some international clients, but there's kind of a range. It's everything from manufacturing, lumber, school, government, nonprofits, a lot of medical community. It's just kind of a broad range. I've yet to find any specific specialty industry. And so people say this to me all the time, well, what do you know about this industry? And I say, I don't know anything about it. What I know is stuff about organizational development, work psychology. And even in the data, I use a lot of Gallup research. And we can lay out some of that company's data, their output, and we can start laying other columns in saying, well, this is what it looks like for your industry or another industry or another industry, and it's not any different. And everyone says, well, we're so different. We all say that. Well, you don't understand, Chance. Or my dad says this, well, we're a farm. But what that means is, at the raw piece, is just, it's human psychology. There are certain basic needs regardless of the industry. Mm-hmm. So yeah, lots of industries.
It was funny. We were working with a consulting group, and they had a common phrase that your business is no different than my business. And I find that across the board to be so true.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about people don't want a job, they want a life. That is so different today than what it used to be 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Watching me have to change because I was so influenced by my parents and what they grew up in, and their culture was you went to work. Right. You worked your butt off.
Right.
And you were dang happy to have that job.
Right.
Right. And then I when I start this company, and my mindset is that, and that doesn't work today.
Right. We see that in the data. So we know the psychological needs have never changed, because we can run that to different generational groups. But I think it's the millennials are being louder about it. So we know that employees don't want a paycheck anymore. I mean, they want a paycheck, but they also want purpose. Right? Those expectations are shifting. I want to get paid fairly, but I want to know why I get up every day. Why do I put my feet there? What do we do that creates value to society in some way, shape, or form? We know that employees don't want just satisfaction. They also want development. How do I grow here? In fact, 59% of millennials say, or they strongly agree that when they apply for a job, opportunities to learn and grow are extremely important. Okay, so development is big. And employees don't want a boss anymore. They want a coach. They don't want general feedback. They don't want this top-down control, commanding hierarchy. Talk to me about performance. They don't want that annual review where we sit down once a year and say, these are all the areas you sucked at. They want ongoing discussion about what's working, what's not. It should be a dialogue, not a monologue. They don't want to keep fixating on weaknesses, right? They want to know where they're strong and how do we apply this. And lastly, I don't want just a job, I want a life. Work should be an extension of who we are. So there is this total shift in workplace expectations. And I think the psychological needs haven't changed. I just think the millennials are louder about it. They're saying something. They have choices. They're leaving jobs sooner. It's a different dynamic. And so 21st century leaders need to have skills for the 21st century. They're just not, they're still operating from a 1950s model. And so a lot of my work is trying to make that transition to what does this look like?
So you and I sat down, we met a couple weeks ago, excuse me, and I was literally so blown away by what you were telling me. I instantly said, Chance, I got to get you in here because this is something I feel that every business owner needs to know is what you're talking about, because some of my most difficult moments in running a business, we're now at 15 or 16 employees, and I even hate the term employees because they're team members because everybody has a buy-in in our business. But for me, one of my most difficult problems has been what you said, don't fixate on the weaknesses.
Yeah.
Because I'm still of the old school mindset, we've got to fill the holes. We can't have these gaps in the business. And so I want to tell everybody, hey, you're doing a great job, but my brain is instantly going to, we need to fix this. So how does somebody like me, right, who I'm just going to call myself pig-headed, how does somebody like me out there in the entrepreneurial world say, I got to recognize this? How do we recognize it first? And then what do we do to start changing our mindsets?
Yeah, so you're right. When you see gaps, they have to be addressed.
Yeah.
That has to happen. And so it's not like people get to do their favorite thing all day long.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this movement in positive psychology around strengths is starting with something really simple, like it's another assessment, right? It's based off personality theory. Let's find strengths. Let's identify your strengths. And then when you get into the culture, it's this ongoing dialogue of how you've been using your strengths. How do I still have to manage my weaknesses, but how do I use that strength lens constantly? How do I partner up with people where I'm not strong? I'm trying to get people on those right seats. And so as an example, I'm not very thorough. I'm not very detail oriented. When I worked in HR, I had to do payroll. I'd have to do it 5 times to find errors. I don't like my own bookkeeping. But I'm very strategic, and I have a kind of a connected lens. I like to see the big picture. So it's training Chance to how do you look at the big picture as you're doing detailed work? So I go to my dashboard often, or I'm building metrics. And so quickly I take that detailed work and I dump it into this bigger database so I can see the trends and themes because that's what I like. So I'm using a strength lens as I look at weaknesses. So we're training employees how to manage their weaknesses with their strengths. We're training employees how to partner up so we can build grids, and I can say, this needs to get moving. This is something Joel needs to have a big role in because of that commanding nature. We're mixing and matching people based off strengths, but it's the dialogue that has to keep happening. So when you and I meet for one-on-ones, my strengths are on the top, and we talk about how do you use them, where are there some gaps, how could you use the strengths of someone else in your team that we need to bring into this to help fill this gap. But it's just a slightly different lens. And what we see is people are more productive, more profitable, and they're having more fun.
Right there you hit on something. People are more profitable. One of the things that intrigued me so much about what you and I talked about was you show a way to bring an ROI to someone bringing you into their company to help them, right? Whereas this isn't just the soft, hey, let's make everybody feel good. This is, hey, I'm going to show you where this is going to create ROI for you.
Yeah, this is I call it a cotton candy industry. Sometimes I call it a BS industry because there's so many players that come in with a song and a dance, and you just, nothing happens. You get nothing out of it. And so when you work with a client, working really hard to identify what do we want to fix, what do we want to change, how do we track that, pre-post, or even if we're doing like engagement polling, we can show before and after and keep that going of, are we getting better at this? So if you can't track it, it's hard to manage change. And so one reason this is a BS industry is we go to a training on, here are the characteristics of leaders, but we don't know what to do. And there's no way of tracking it, measuring it. So for a $20 to $40 billion industry, not much is happening. So that ROI is critical. How do we measure stuff? So I have a coaching client, and every week every time we meet, he's scoring. We've got a 360 assessment, so we know what his scores are there. We've got some scores and how well he thinks he's doing. But every time we meet, we're going to continue to track that. Where are you at now? And I want a little bit of feedback. He's giving me a little narrative on each of these interpersonal, characteristics. And so that continued conversation, that continued measurement is putting pressure on him to get better. And when you come back with another 360, they have some pressure to get better. And so measuring stuff isn't dehumanizing. People want accountability. Employees say that if they have accountability, they're 2.5 times more likely to be engaged at work. So people want to know how well they're doing. They want that feedback.
So let's talk about, how does a business know they need you? What is your typical kind of, it sounds like you do several things. So I don't want to pigeonhole you, but most of us as business owners, we don't ever want to admit there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Until the damn wheels are falling off.
Yeah.
Right? That's usually when you're freaking out because the house is burning down around you.
The car's already wrapped around the flagpole.
Instead of braking, you should have turned the wheel. But you can't stop looking at the train wreck you're just about to drive right into, right? So I guess I don't even know how to ask the question the right way because I know it's going to be so big and broad, but how does someone bring you in? Like, what is your typical kind of client?
Usually they see me speak at something, or it's a referral. That's where most of the business comes from. And when you look at a business, there's all these obvious parts that smart companies do. They're focusing on finance, marketing, operations, those classic topics, HR. But a healthy organization is looking a little bit deeper. They're looking at the soul of the organization, which is mission, vision, that fabric, that religion, and it's the people. And it unfortunately, a lot of times where they see it is the metrics are changing. We're losing high-performing employees, turnover is going up, engagement numbers are going down. But the best clients say, we're a good company, but we want to be a great company. And if they've heard me talk a little bit and they see some of the tools, that's kind of that buy-in. And I think the visual part, when they see the tools, what they can do, how they can apply it, how simple it is, that's where you get them. But there's some learning that has to take place before I get a client. So a good client, though, they're interested in that and they're vulnerable. Like they'll say, we're not good at all this stuff. We want to be a great company. And hell, I'm not even great at this stuff. So there's a great sense of vulnerability that I find my really good clients have. A client that I'll push myself away from the table is there's kind of an arrogance. There's siloing that they don't want to identify, politicking, turf wars. They've got it all figured out. It's an external locus of control. That's a bad client. I can't help them.
Help. I'm gonna interject here because how does somebody recognize if they're that bad fit for you?
I don't know.
Because you raise politicking and turf wars, right? Silos.
Yeah.
Oftentimes we don't know it's there.
Yeah. I think it starts at the top. They have to see it at the top. The owner, the president, the CEO has to say, I feel like they might not use siloing language, but they're using other language. We're just not very clear in our communication. I say something, it turns into something else. We have this weird conflict over there. But the owner at the top, they just see there's something wrong with the health. We're a smart company, but we're not a healthy company. A bad client, they'll say, we've got some problems, but we just need you to come in so we can check off a box so we said we did something. Bad client. I just can't help them. but it's that top person. If they're self-aware, good's okay, but great's even better. That's ideal.
And so you mentioned coaching. I've talked about coaching on several of our vlogs and podcasts. What about from your coaching angle? What's the kind of ideal client for you on coaching?
Pretty similar. They have to be willing. They have to have that willingness to participate. They have to be vulnerable. And so
what is coaching? Actually, let's back up.
Yes.
What is coaching?
So I define coaching as you're just taking a healthy individual and it's got a future orientation. You're helping them to achieve new goals. They're trying to change something. It's a change conversation from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And so a great client says, if we can, we'll do some kind of 360. We'll get some data on them so they know where to put their energies. And some clients are simple things like, I want to have a better relationship with this person. I want to lose some weight, blah, blah, blah. But you're helping to stimulate future development. And so all I'm doing is I don't need to be an expert in their life, but we're talking about what is the goal, what's the expectation, where do you want to get, what's the reality, where you're at now, opportunities, where do you want to get, how do we overcome this, and then you're following up. So it's a really basic script and how to have dialogue, but you're helping them to overcome some of that subconscious stuff so they can move forward. And it's ROI, quantitative and qualitatively. If we don't see them getting better, it's a bad investment.
And how so? What do you mean if we don't see them getting better?
Yeah, so they're putting money out for me to sit with them. And if we don't see the people around them seeing behavior change or whatever they're trying to get. And so this is interesting. If I have a client that first 3 weeks, let's say it's something simple, they make all this progress. They're excited about it. They're excited about the potential outcomes. Consciously, they're very invested. And then 3 weeks after, they start to fall off because subconsciously they start to get in their way. And so the coach is there to keep the momentum, to keep the accountability, to keep the conversation rolling forward. And if they are stumbling, maybe we picked the wrong goal, maybe we're working on the wrong thing. But you got to be careful because this can get into counseling really quick. It can get into therapy really quick. And so learning, when am I coaching? When am I mentoring, giving some advice? When am I teaching? Sometimes I'm stopping and I'm going to give you some information and learning to navigate that space. So a good coaching client is they want to learn, they want to get better. Like that willingness is a super big driver, and the vulnerability. If they've got excuses for everything, we're just not going to get very far.
Well, probably because that's kind of indicative of how they're approaching almost everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's that denial is so thick in front of them that they can't see through it anyway, then getting them to make an eventual change that you're trying to coach them towards is it just won't resonate. It'll just fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, I think the biggest part of coaching is that motivation to change in the first place. So envision walking up this mountain. That's the hard part. Going down is the easy part. But that first part is, why is change important? Are you capable of this? Are you willing to do this? Why are we doing this? Like you're really testing them. And once they've done that hard work and they get to the top of that hill, the planning, that's a piece of cake, right? They're putting together a plan, and I'm not giving them a plan. I'm just facilitating the dialogue, and then it's just momentum. But it's that front piece. It's that change management piece of why are we doing this? Where's it taking us? How are we going to do this? That's the hard part. So all this work has a lot to do with change management.
Is there some commonalities between personality types and either the lack of wanting to change or going all in on changing something? Like, are there certain personality types in the world that just accept change better than others?
Sure. Yeah. So we might say someone who has more of a preference for big picture, abstract concepts. Change is kind of fun. Like for me, change is quite fun, and that can drive people nuts. And that might represent only a quarter to a third of the population.
Gotcha.
And then polar, that would be something that's very concrete, here and now, stability. Change is rather disruptive. Mm-hmm. And so there are some traits that would have some relationship with preference for change. So great leaders, as you were explaining your personality style a little bit, we might find you a little more pioneering, a little more bold, right? We see that in your entrepreneurialism and how you run your business. But if 2/3 to 3/4 most people find change to be excruciating, they want stability. How do you flex into that and make sure that in this message there is stability, there is comfort, there is it's very it's open, it's transparent, right? So it's learning that flex so everyone's okay with it. So in the coaching, you have to be able to see that stuff. So I'll almost always have some kind of personality assessment on the front end. So I know how they're built, and I already know where they're going to have some struggles and where I need to flex them a little bit.
That's awesome. Way cool. Thank you.
And I'm going to open myself up a bit here because I am somebody who craves constant change. That is part of my habit. Whereas my office manager does not, right? Julie likes things to be set A, B, C, D. And if things get thrown out of order, it drives her bonkers. And I come in and I turn things into a whirlwind. And I just jump right into her office and I say, okay, where are we at this and this? And she has her days planned and I've now just completely blown it up.
Yeah.
Someone like me, how do I become better, more cognizant of someone like Julie so I'm not throwing her world in a tailspin all the time?
Great. That's a great observation, great question. So one of the cultural tools I use right up front is some kind of personality work. And so I use a lot of personality assessments. The most simple, elegant, memorable is something like Wiley's DISC, right? And there's a million rip-offs of it, but it has good psychometrics, and it's just easy to use. And so as you're learning about each other, and she's developing some self-awareness of like, I like that stability, I like the objectivity, the accuracy, and you like the command, the control, pioneering, dominance, whatever that is, you're seeing that in each other, and you're starting to almost appreciate as you sit at the table. We know you're going to move it forward. You know she's going to bring stability, but it's learning to flex. So you can't live in your world. You can't live in that little space because it's exhausting. I don't care what your personality style is. It's exhausting to everybody. And so you're learning to step towards her sometimes. You're learning to pull her back, pull her away if she's not flexing. And so I'm a big advocate of one-on-ones in the workplace. And frequency could be a quarter to every week. It just depends on the kind of business and how long they are. But you can have it at the top of that worksheet. Their strengths, their DISC style, and it's constantly reminding you. And you bring that into our dialogue of, I know you're built like this. We need to stretch out, etc. I suggest employees once a quarter sit down. I do something called comparison reports. So if you and I are working together, I've got your approach and my approach. And next quarter, I'm going to meet with you. And next quarter, I'm going to meet with you. And we see some of those nuances. Like you're really frank and to the point. I might beat around the bush a little bit more because I want some harmony. And as we're talking over that cup of coffee once a quarter, I'm realizing sometimes with you, I need to be a little more frank because that's what you're looking for. And sometimes with me, you've got to approach me with that cookie. And so we're just learning to flex a lot more.
Absolutely. If my wife listens to this podcast, which I'm sure she's not going to because she is undoubtedly tired of hearing my voice just the little bit I am home. I think I'm going to hear flex more than I've ever heard in my life from her.
Yeah.
So I'm thank you. Everywhere I walk, she'll just be behind me going flex, flex.
Carl Jung said part of wisdom is playing with those other parts of your psyche.
Yeah.
And it just makes you a more human being. You don't lose your essence. But there's something fun about that, especially when it comes back to entrepreneurialism and running small business. You've got to be able to flex towards numbers, results. You love that. You've got to be able to flex towards skepticism and questioning, but you've got to flex to collaboration, enthusiasm, inclusiveness, stability. And so that's what we see in entrepreneurs is they're kind of fascinated with all that, and they're willing to do that. There's an adaptability that comes with it.
So let's see if I can throw a good curveball at you because I hear this one all the time.
Yeah.
Which is, let's say you're an employee and you've got a manager or a boss who doesn't flex. How does the employee give the nudge, get the person to flex? I've a friend of mine did this in a company. He walked up and he handed her a book and said, "Boy, this would be. I think you'd really like this book."
Yeah,
and it did not work.
The old passive aggressive
Yes.
try.
Yeah, it was,
The Hail Mary.
yeah. That's a good question. How do you manage up?
yeah,
I think part of the arrangement, part of the contract is I'm paid to do a certain job in a certain way, and that's the reality of it. Great companies recognize that we have these differences. We have to flex. We have to understand different strengths. But if you're working with a manager that's really not that effective, I always need to step towards them. So I've had a lot of dominant types of managers. I need to step towards them. I need to come with results. I need to be short, brief. And so that's going to help our relationship. But how do I help them flex away? Right? That's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to try to remind them, how do we think about the culture? How's this going to affect engagement? And so even if I keep bringing that stuff up and it's not getting anywhere and they're an ineffective manager, I have to make a choice, right? Do I leave this? Do I get on a different bus? Or do I continue to live in an unhealthy relationship? Right? We do this all the time in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marriages. And so it comes down to choice. So how do I make someone else change? Not going to happen. There's little things I can do to make the relationship a little more harmonious, but I can't make them change. And if they're not a very good manager, they're bad enough. This is where I start looking at exit strategies or finding different roles within the company.
I do like the term you use, manage up. Jocko Willink's book, who is a Navy SEAL, he writes a really great book. One of his interesting stories is they're in Iraq, Desert Storm. They're doing special ops, and they get frustrated because the higher ups aren't seeing what they're seeing. And one of his men on his team underneath him comes to him and says, "They're going to make us go do this routine, and this just doesn't make sense. This is stupid. What is wrong with these guys at HQ?" Mm-hmm. And his response is, "Well, is it their fault or is it ours?"
Yeah.
In that example, they weren't managing up. They weren't getting the right info in the right way to the right people so that their higher-ups could pass down the right orders to them.
Yep.
And so I thought that one really stuck with me, was how do we as employees manage up? Because I don't care if it's an owner of the company, you're always everybody should be managing up, right? So how do you get that kind of confidence in your team to be able to do that?
Yeah, I think it comes back again to, if I know you have that style, I'm going to come with my stuff. I'm going to step towards you with data, with results. I'm going to try to speak your language.
Let me spin that, though, right? Because I just had this with my office manager, and we were talking numbers the other day, and I said, okay, we're kind of creating a new budgeting system, and I said, and I want you to, part of your job is not just to give me the numbers, but part of your job is also to tell me when our numbers are out of whack. Because you're the one who's seeing the numbers before I am. And so with that, she says to me, well, I can't tell you that you're spending too much or you're doing, right? I'm trying to get her to manage up.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do this across my team, and they find it difficult, and I'm guessing it's because of my personality, but I think as employees, too many of us are afraid to say, hey, there are some things that aren't right here, right? Are you finding that, or is it just because I'm an a-hole and my team is saying, yeah, I don't dare go to Joel with that?
Yeah, no, I think we want to change the structure of these hierarchies where we see that kind of team concept, and we need employees to be accountable.
Yeah,
we need them to step up to the plate. Like if we're doing one-on-ones, they've got to come in that one-on-one scoring their performance before I talk to them. I need them to. We know people want to know what's expected. Well, if they don't know, they better be prepared to have that conversation about what the goals are, what is the expectation. So we put so much weight on managers to be superheroes that we need teams, that's part of that culture, is to be engaged and be accountable for that work as well, have some ownership in it. And that dialogue is beautiful. Like, we end up finding you don't want all the details to the data. Mm-hmm. You want the ranges. I kind of want the metrics, the power metrics. Like, I just want to know what's a safe range and a bad range. I want that short, sweet stuff. And they're learning that. You might have to teach them how to do that, but then they're learning how you want the data presented, but you also know they need that time for that accuracy, and they're going to have a lot of extra data.
Mm-hmm.
Dialogue is king. That conversation will heal everything. But we need employees to step up as well. That's part of the culture, right?
Yeah. And we all want to blame, it's the millennials or the Generation Xers or the Generation Ys, right? You hear the same thing through every generation.
Yeah,
it's the younger generation.
Kids
they just
days.
don't. Kids these days.
Yeah.
So with those speaking barriers between generations, how do we break those down? What are some key simple steps to be able to break that down inside the workplace?
Part of it's personality. Part of it's just learning what are the rules of being a good team player. We've never been taught this. You don't learn it at university, you don't learn it in companies, but part of it is we need to learn to trust each other. We need to learn to be more vulnerable with each other. Admit to our mistakes, know where we're weak, ask for feedback, just being genuine. Because we know if we have trust now in this group, we can now have good conflict, right? Most companies, there's this continuum from artificial harmony to mean-spirited attacks, and they sit on artificial harmony because they don't want to bring stuff up.
Yeah.
But if you and I trust each other, I expect you to come to the table and critique the ideas, the concepts, not me personally, but that's the richness. Because if we get everything on the table in good, healthy debate, now when we put a plan together, we're committed to it. It has clarity, and we're all on the same team. This is where we see siloing start to simplify. We have one plan, we're moving forward with it, and then with this new rule of being a team player is we're accountable. So if I don't follow through, if I don't do the research and bring something, you get permission to say, Chance, we talked about this, right? And that can show up in my performance. Holding each other accountable in the team, and then finally realizing we're on one team. We're one team with one mission. And if you're here for your resume, if you're here for your ego, you're not a good team player, you might be on the wrong bus. So just teaching employees what are the rules of engagement. We've never been taught that before, and we need to get that done so we're better team players.
So, because we know our brains don't hold on to anything for more than 30 seconds. If you're a new manager coming into a company that is very dysfunctional in 30 seconds or less, how do you do that?
If a new manager comes on, how do we teach them?
How does that new manager take what you just said in 30 seconds or less? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But seriously, because I had this happen in a client I was working with in their business side, they brought on a manager, and the managers finally just said, I can't do anything here. Your culture is too embedded.
Yep.
And you as the owner aren't helping me really make the adjustments that you're looking for.
Yeah, there's still a responsibility on their part.
Mm-hmm.
Find out what are the scripts for engagement. There's really easy scripts out there. Here are the 12 things that we know employees need, right? We can measure that. And most of the variance in engagements due to the manager. Learn that. Learn the rules of what it takes to be a good team player. Make that part of your group's culture. Learn each other's personality styles, and finally learn how to have one-on-ones. One-on-ones is where we're going to clean up all this extra garbage, where we incorporate all that and talk about performance. And you're going to find real quick some people don't want to be on that team. They're going to find this person's making me do all this stuff. They're making me perform. You're going to slowly get them off the bus or get them on a different seat. And if the company's struggling with that practice, which I find to be theoretically and research-based, you're on the manager's on the wrong bus.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some really easy scripts. We have 50 to 70 years of good research in front of us around what happens and what works in the workplace. It's just learning to apply it. And there's so many basic skills and tools, things that we can measure. And that's what most of my work is let's take this easy stuff and let's start practicing it. And I'm not going to do a song and dance and leave. I'm going to stay with you, and we're going to keep implementing this so it becomes second nature.
I know we're getting short on time here, so I want to make sure we get this in. You and I had talked about what you do. We've talked about it today, but when you and I first met, you also talked about the fact that there are some government grants out there to help businesses, small businesses, bring someone like you in to help them with culture and leadership and management. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a lot of these small businesses don't have a budget for training development. And so I work with as many clients as I can. If they're 50 employees or smaller, it's a Department of Labor grant where they can get up to $2,000 per employee per year for a full-time employee, and they can use it for skill-based training. And so now you have a training budget. I mean, that's just a beautiful thing. And then another thing that we do is building resumes. So my programs get certified through Dawson College. So if you go through a program, I've got a nice relationship with them, and we'll get a college certificate as well. So you're able to get it funded, get a college certificate on top of it. It's just a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I'll work with clients through the grant process and help them fill out all the forms, because there's a lot of forms. I'll make sure it's an easy process. Yep.
Give us a real quick good example of somebody who's done that. What was the great result that came out of it?
Yeah, so worked with the manufacturing company. At the front end, we did some communications training. We did some Gallup engagement polling. They scored in the 49th percentile of the database. So out of 100 companies, they're 49th. Over that next year, teaching people more about personality, getting that leadership team tooled, teaching employees how to communicate more effectively, et cetera, taking all the leaders through some training. And a year later, we got them in the 89th percentile of the database. So we know these are objective, changes in the organization. And qualitatively, just watch them. Watch how they work. They're working on more difficult strategic decisions now than they ever have. And so when you have that ROI mindset, we can track that stuff and show that we're making improvement. And that was all grant driven.
And they saw an ROI on it.
Yeah.
Well, number one, it probably didn't cost them a lot because the grant may have covered quite a bit of it.
Yep.
You held up the zero sign,
Yep.
so that's awesome. So you brought a second level of value through this grant. That's amazing.
Yeah, so it's easier to get an ROI with zero money.
Yeah.
But watching how the leaders perform, watching the efficiencies, finding gaps in the business they never had before, even profitability. Like, what products are we carrying that we shouldn't carry anymore? We're just forcing them to think differently. Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I'm kind of blown away.
We could do a part 2 easily.
Very easily. I could keep going, but I know we're short on time. I'm trying to think of a decent last question that just isn't going to sound really stupid at this point.
Where would somebody go to find out more about your services and kind of gauge and then eventually reach out to you?
Yeah, bigskyway.biz is the best place. A little kind of overview of the services. A little video. So bigskyway.biz is tell you a little bit about myself and my philosophy and the story of the agriculture principles and how I work. That's a great place to start. And then what I'll do is we just sit down at a table. We visit. There's no cost to that. And I'll start throwing out some different ideas, and we'll make something that fits that organization.
Nice.
And we put together a plan, run it through a grant. Yeah, it's all fun stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But I'm fully in it.
Yeah.
Myself. You know what I mean? You're talking about culture. I'm very much in the throes of trying to build a culture.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And thinking how we feel. Like we took a personality test 3 weeks ago. Just one of those online things, right? Just to try to see where we were at with things. But it was pretty engaging, was it not, Woody? I mean, we got a kind of a sense of who each other is.
Yep.
So when you're talking about all this and how it actually impacts, it just makes me want to know more. So thank you for sharing your website and everything else.
Yeah, we do the culture test. We do a disc test with everybody who comes onto our team because I find it personally invaluable to understand a little bit more of what makes them tick. And it also creates a new connection as a manager.
It's an exercise in vulnerability.
Yes.
I know how I am. I know how you're built.
Absolutely.
That's an exercise in vulnerability.
And I give them mine as well.
Yeah.
So they know right at the outset what my tendencies are. Right, where my leanings are. So, wow. Chance, this was absolutely fantastic having you in here. I believe we are just about out of time, so let's wrap her up, Brad. What do you think? Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody, I know we're going to be bringing Chance back on this because I'm sure we're going to get a ton more feedback. We had our first little tweet in on this, so that was great. I'm glad we had that interruption. Everybody, this was probably one of our best interviews to date. I want to thank Chance Eaton from Big Sky Way. Chance, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Woody.
Yeah.
Seriously, thank you.
We got Brad on mic
awesome.
number 2. Woody behind the cameras, kicking butt here for us, making this all happen. So everybody, thanks so much for watching. Remember, we offer these interviews on our podcast. You can also catch us on YouTube and our vlog there. Please make sure on Facebook or on our podcast that you like us, that you share us. It's the only way we can get the great word out of all these interviews that are so amazing that we've been doing. This one just absolutely blew my mind. I can't thank you enough, Chance, again for coming. I'm Joel SIlverman, your host, and we look forward to seeing you on the other side, everybody.